In today's video, I'm going to be teaching you how to master the braking in F1 2025, going through 3 stages of the braking zone on how you can improve your performance, confidence, and consistency. So, with that being said, let's hit the track and straight into the action. So here we go then at Silverstone Circuit, how to master braking on F1 2025. Today we're going to be breaking down into different topics such as going in the gravel. That wasn't on the script, but what was on the script in fact was how to hit your initial peak brake pressure. If you look to the center of the screen on the halo, you can see the red line, what is indicating the brake pressure that we have activated, and as you can see, of course, the green is indicating the throttle, as we over exaggerated what we're doing with the inputs there. Back to the point. So we're going to be hitting the initial brake pressure, how to brake in a straight line, how to be turning and braking at the same time. For example, like this, having brake pressure and turning at the same time without locking the front tires going around the corner, and then also how to release the brake pressure once you get to the corner so you can carry apex speed all the way around and maximize your lap time potential. At the end of the video as well, we're going to be touching upon the braking bias, as you can see in the bottom right hand side of the screen. At the moment we have 54, 55, 56, but we'll do a full breakdown of that later in the episode. So first of all, braking in a straight line. Formula 1 cars have an incredible amount of downforce and grip when traveling at speed. In a very basic explanation, what is happening when you're traveling at speed, the air is going over the wings of the car and using it to generate downforce, what is pushing the tires to generate more friction into the road, and that's how you get more grip in a simple explanation. Very much the opposite of a plane. A plane of course generates lift and the car generates downforce to make grip. The faster you go, the more downforce you have, i.e. the more friction the tires have to be pushed into the road, and again that's how you're generating the grip of a Formula 1 car. So when you're traveling faster, you have more braking pressure you can use because you have more grip from the friction being pushed into the road with the tires. As you start traveling slower and slower and slower, you're going to get less and less grip, quite simply because there's less airflow going over the wings to generate that downforce that we touched upon just a minute ago. So this is why when you're traveling fast at, let's say, 150 miles an hour, you can really stamp on the brake pressure. Right now we're going to get up to 160 miles an hour, hit the brake pressure, and you can see we don't actually lock up the tires into about 80 miles an hour. But as soon as you go underneath 80 miles an hour, it almost becomes unusable to be above 80% on the brake pressure, otherwise you end up locking up the tires. So keep that in mind, and quite simply, the faster you're going, the more braking pressure you can use in a result of that, and the slower that you're going, the less braking pressure you can use. We also call this trail braking, that when you hit the brake pressure initially and then release it slowly and gradually as you get towards the corner. Watch my red bar on the halo right now. As we're going to hit the brake pressure, we hit the initial pressure and then release slowly into the apex, and that is very nice. And we do that every corner around the circuit. So then we initially hit the braking pressure, we're maximizing the grip threshold of the car because of the aerodynamical grip from the speed we're traveling at that exact moment, and then as the speed goes away from the car, we start releasing the brake pressure to be adjusting ourselves to the grip the car can provide to us. So that is the first part of today's lesson about how you hit that brake pressure, then release it slowly as you lose speed going into the corner or through the braking zone in that way. So now we've talked about how you hit the initial braking pressure and how you get the car initially slowed down. We're going to start talking about how you mix that in with turning and braking. This is a really complex thing to be mastering and something that's very difficult, especially if you're new to not using ABS within F1 2025. So it is all about understanding expectations from the front tires and what you can expect from the car. If you are turning more aggressively, for example 90 degrees, you're not going to have a lot of ability to put on braking pressure because you're asking a lot of the front tires. Think of it like this: the more that you turn the steering wheel, the more that you're asking the tires to do. So if you turn the steering wheel really slightly, like this, we're about 10-20 degrees on the steering wheel, just turning at the moment, there's not a lot of friction and a lot of stress on the tire. I think stress is a really good word to sort of be describing what the tire is feeling. The less stress you put on the tire, the more you can be applying the braking pressure in the opposite equation, of course. The less stress you put on the tire, the more braking pressure you can put. So this is why when you go into corners and you apply a lot of turning lock, you can see instantly the front tires lock up, and we are overstressing the front tires, and that is resulting to double front lockups. So now that we've got through that sort of introduction to why you're locking up the tyre while turning and braking at the same time, we can start going into how you can master your technique to go around the apexes as fluently, smoothly as possible to be maximising the grip underneath you within the tyres and friction of the road. So now we're going to go up into Mags and Beckett's, as it's just going to be a good example. Normally you wouldn't really brake in these corners, but what we're going to do is slow it down and brake in these corners so you get an easy example. As you can see, the first corner, not that much turning needed, so we can get away with more braking, but the more turning we have to do, then the more we are sensitive to locking up the tyres. So now we've done that sort of introduction through that segment, we're going to be going more advanced into the final corners here at Silverstone. And again, the point is, the more that you're turning, the less you can apply the brake pressure, and that is a good equation you could be running with. So when the wheel is straight, maximum brake pressure, and as we start turning the car, and of course if the speed starts to bleed off as well, then you have to be releasing the brake pressure adequately to be compromising for the new grip that the front tyres have over the surface of the road. Again, going through it with the first sector here at Silverstone, wheel is in a straight line, maximum brake pressure, and then as we start turning, we release the brake pressure slowly and gradually going into the corner to be maximising the ability of the brakes. So that has now been sort of an introduction and covered, I would say, about how you can start turning and braking at the same time, and then the secret sauce, the secret magic of that is how you can start carrying more and more speed into the corner, and how that works. And when you gain confidence, you can start braking later and start releasing that pedal just slower to keep your ability and your fidelity on the brake pedal to its maximum precision. And that is really where the best of the best drivers in sim racing or real racing apart. They are able to be maximizing the performance of the car. They can brake super late, maximize the brake pressure going into the corner without activating ABS if you're in a GT car, or locking up the front tyres if you're in a Formula style car like Formula 1, for example, or a car that doesn't have ABS. So now you can see maximum brake pressure and maximizing the initial part of the braking zone, and then as you start turning, releasing that brake pressure to be compromising for the stress that you're putting underneath the front tyres. And the faster you want to go, it is simply about braking that little bit later and doing that technique a little bit better, a little bit more precision, and just carrying more and more speed as you do that, and carrying the brake pressure into the corner. Ideally, in a perfect world, in 99% of scenarios, because some corners and some grip conditions are slightly different, but in the perfect world, you start releasing the brake pressure when you get to your clipping point of the apex, and that is how you can be maximizing your grip. And then from that point onwards, you can start just getting back on the power. So now we've covered how to hit the initial brake pressure in F1 2025. As a recap for that segment, all about maximum efficiency, straight away, bang, hard on the brake pedal, and then releasing it slowly as you reduce the speed of the car, or the aerodynamics is another way to think of it. As they reduce, you reduce your brake pedal adequately to be compromising for the new grip. As you start to stress the front tires by turning the wheel, then the more that you're turning, the more that you have to be reducing your brake pressure as a reaction to that, and how much stress you're putting the front tires through. Then of course, as you get to the clipping point of the apex, i.e. right now, you want to be releasing the brake pressure here, because then it allows the car to continue rotating and you to have the freedom of mind to get back on the power and accelerate out of the corner. So now just some live examples before we go into talking about the brake pressure on F1 2025, hitting the brake and then just letting the car release slowly going into the corner. And of course, the slower that we're going and the more stress that we're putting the front tyres under, the less we're able to be applying the braking pressure as a natural result of that. Luckily, Cops Corner, we don't need to be braking, at least in the dry conditions. I think probably in the wet conditions, it's just a lift of the throttle as well in most of the fuel. Maybe 100% race, you would have to be braking at the start of it. But you can see through here, just a little bit of brake. As you can see, we have a lot of stress to the front tyres in the final parts of Maggotts and Beckett's there. That means that we have to be adequately compromising our input to be equating for the front grip available to us. Again, through slow corner, nice little bit of braking. But as now we arrive in a complete straight line, we can hit the brake pressure hard and then release it slowly as we get towards the corner as the downforce goes away from the car, and also we start to stress the front tyres by turning the wheel. On to the final segment of the video, and that is going to be about the braking bias. It's quite simple really, and the higher that you go on the braking bias, the more sensitivity the front tyres have. For example, you can see we put it up to 66% and we basically instantly locked the front tyres and it was a bit of a disaster. If we go all the way back down to 50% on the braking bias, we'll go to third person camera for this, so it will show it a bit easier. The rear tyres are going to be very sensitive and easy to lock up in this situation. And as you can see, the car is spinnerla. And we are all the way over into the grandstands, almost playing in the gravel. Far from ideal. So what is a good way to find the ideal braking bias for you in F1 2025? And how can you be adapting it around the circuit to be maximising your performance? Well, a good baseline to be running is in the low speed corners. About 52 to 53% is a good number to be running, and as you get to the sort of bigger braking zones, for example the final chicane in Silverstone that we'll be getting up to in sector 3, or the big hairpin in China at the end of the back straight, then you want to be going higher on the braking bias, even up to 54 to 56%. And a sort of good rule of thumb is the bigger the braking zone is and the more straight that the braking zone is, the higher that you want to be going on the braking bias, to about a maximum of 56%, and that is going to be ideal to be looking after your confidence and not risking too many lockups going around the circuit. Of course, the more that we're going to be turning and braking at the same time, you want the braking bias to be slightly more rearward, so then you're not risking to lock the front tyres. As in this situation right now, it's slightly faster to have under rotations on the rear axle than it is on the front axle. Going through that corners again, of course, we just did it in 54%. So now we're going to be doing it in 56%. Actually, no, let's exaggerate it. We're going to go to 60% on the braking bias, and you're going to see it's much harder to hit the corner right now. In fact, impossible with 60%. And that's why, if you're slightly unsure on the braking bias to be taking for these corners where you're braking and turning at the same time for a large proportion of the distance that you're on the brake pedal, then going lower down to about 54% is the ideal way to be doing it. So there we go. Hopefully this video has been helpful for you on how to master the braking on F1 2025. I've been Brendon Leigh, and thank you so much for watching the video. And of course, I'll see you next time. With that being said, grazie, ciao ciao, bye bye.